Hello, loves. Good evening. I have my tea with me tonight. I'm feeling really tender and feeling like shifting something today. Like something has already been shifting today. And so I'm curious to see how our practice unfolds. Part of what I find most deeply valuable about practice is that I have a certain shape, an entry point, an experience in the middle, and then a closing dynamic as the basic shape of just any sort of practice, whether I'm teaching or leading a class, whether I'm entering a rehearsal process, whether I have my morning journaling pages, whether it is a magical ritual where I'm utilizing ceremony and ritual practice in a very specific way. Whatever it is, it helps me to have entry points and exit points, and then understand that the middle I can be with what arises as I need to, that there's a form of ceremony that can happen there, and ritual being the practice, like the steps, and ceremony being like the aliveness and the willingness to meet what's present and to feel what's already there, what's needed. So I just kind of want to sit back into that for a moment and invite you to do the same for yourself today, wherever you are, whatever time of day it is while you're meeting with this video. And take a moment to check in with yourself and listen. And just ask yourself what's needed in this moment. For me, I just needed a long, deep drink of tea. Maybe there was something that came to mind for you, and maybe it was something you could experience in this moment. And maybe it's something bigger or broader that happens outside of the containment of this particular experience we're entering together, entering into this practice. I had a big day and I wanted to come in and just sort of film so I could edit and move about the rest of my evening, get this online. This daily practice of embodiment videos for the month of December. It has been at a pace that has not allowed me to second guess myself, really not given me time to do what I tend to do, which is shrink back and reassess and integrate. And at the same time, I've had to find ways where I can still do that and come back into connection within 24-hour period of time. So this is a practice for me that has been a stretch, but it's also been an experiment with time a little bit. Can I utilize my same cyclical dynamic that I have that I know that works for me? And I love surrender cycles, ending cycles, to be in connection with release, letting go, and deep, deep rest. So I do a lot of practice in my own sort of integration process while sleeping, while resting. And it feels like some of that medicine wants to come into the actual practice we have today. So I'm going to invite you to put your hand on your heart and just connect to maybe an area of your life that feels like it's moving too fast. And I want to invite you to see if you can feel the undercurrent, the flow underneath the speediness of the upper layers or levels, and come to sort of a depth underneath it, sort of basin of support. And you may totally follow what it is I'm saying, and this might be more esoteric or more just different than you're used to. And if so, just go with that. Allow that to be okay. And any resistance that arises, I invite you to meet that and see if you can just unhook it gently. I have been cycling through the day since this morning of not being sure what grounding rod to bring with me into this practice. I was thinking about my grief recovery handbook, which is the action program for moving beyond death, divorce, and other losses, including health, career, and faith. How grief recovery addresses trauma and PTSD is an updated section. And a lot of what I do and have been feeling called to speak on in self-care for performers is the necessity of integrating trauma, how we can address that as a community, how we can be informed of it as individual artists for our own needs, as well as for the needs of our community and those we work with, and allow us to see and sense into inner and outer resources that are available for support when there's an inflammation of symptoms, and also knowing how to identify red flags that crop up via emotional content in yourself, as sort of like a, hey, take a look at this, or I'm not ready for this, or this is similar to something that's hurt us in the past. Let's pause or redirect. And sometimes that's in a particular project. Sometimes that's with a particular person. Sometimes that's with a kind of angle of how you are approaching career. Sometimes it's also about the core values of how and why we are relating with the performing arts to begin with, what it is we are wanting in relationship with it, which brings me to this next book. And I was also looking at maybe bringing into the fold, which is The Art of Receiving and Giving, The Wheel of Consent by Betty Martin, DC, with Robin Dalzen. And I want to bring some of this book's medicine. I think I feel all hot and flushed when I say this, but it feels really like a desire and a necessity to be with the heat of it. So in her, I'm going to read a little from the back. In her framework, The Wheel of Consent, Dr. Betty Martin traces the fundamental roots of consent to our bodies, how we learn to ignore our desires and needs, and the harm caused when we do not honor our own limits or the limits of others. In a world where the hashtag #MeToo movement sheds light on boundary violations, the Wheel of Consent offers a deeply nuanced and precise way to practice consent as an agreement that brings integrity, responsibility, and joy into every interaction. And I think consent and pleasure and touch and boundaries and desires and all of those things are rather complex, and there's a lot of intersections, I think, of interest and nuance and experience that each performance body has in both historical, personal context, and also we hold as a community and an awareness of a lot of content there. My heart just feels so simultaneously ready and also fiercely aware that it's heavier content, or it doesn't need to be, but it's a place of different kinds of edges, and everybody has different past experiences and different current desires, whether that's how you want your career to unfold or the kinds of roles you want to play or the dynamic that feels best to you with the director or choreographer or a performance partner, and being able to understand the nuances of giving and receiving, even with performing artists and audience, of how there is an energy exchange that we have. I think there are some really beautiful psychological and spiritual sort of frameworks that are deepened into within this work, both in this book and then also more widely in the communities and the cultures that are really addressing that kind of conversation and deepening into practices that help navigate what can feel like a razor's edge sometimes for us without blowing by or bypassing moments. I want to read for a little bit from the book. I actually want to read this. The erotic elements of taking. This is a Rumi poem translated by Coleman Barks. And it goes, when you do things from your soul, the river itself moves through you. Freshness and a deep joy are the signs of the currents. And so much of what I do when it feels most honest is really like soul liberation, release, channeling, funneling, life force, and soul essence. And there is an eroticism to that. There is a pleasurable component to it. And in popular culture and performing arts industries, oftentimes when people have access to that river or that channel of eroticism, it can often be exploited or taken advantage of when we aren't attuned to that art of giving and receiving, which Betty Martin speaks about in this book. So I want to bring into the question of, I see myself right now like standing up and doing an embodiment. So I think that's the direction maybe I'll just walk. I am now the art of receiving and giving. It feels like maybe in the context though of like the performing arts, maybe in the context of self-care for performers. I'm not quite sure, but there's something that feels important there. So I'm just going to stand up and speak something, walk something. Okay. I am now embodying the art of giving and receiving through the lens of self-care for performers. Ooh. I feel like I just wanted to like rush towards you and like deliver something. And then step back though, because I feel a little hot and it felt a little like, but I hadn't asked for consent. So I'm curious for us in our agreements that come up from this. One, where is the consent? Where are the agreements? Well, I'm here, so I'm navigating my own consent within the context of this relationship we have. I do consent to us entering practice together. I do consent to you listening to what comes out of this practice, witnessing on video what comes out of this practice. And I think perhaps here's where I get sticky is I think I am uncertain on how to gauge consent when it's a recorded experience, right? So, and part of it is also improvisational. So how to gain consent from you? I suppose it's that your witness is that I ask that you consent to my honesty. I ask that you consent to my vulnerability. I ask that you consent to holding space for what transpires from a place of non-judgment and willingness to connect with your own heart and soul. And then if you consent, keep watching. And if you don't consent, then I have to trust that you will stop the video. And so there's a trust piece there that feels scary to me. I feel myself like carving through space with my hands. I almost feel like I have an image of, I know it's sideways, it's not straight up and down, but it feels like the fin of a shark, like gliding through water. It's like this awareness that I'm coming at it from a different angle, and I'm aware of the predatory nature of the body that I inhabit. And my eyes closed, and something's happening with my hands right now. I'm just going to kind of let it evolve. I don't know what's going on. My right arm feels like back behind the scapula, kind of feels tense and like hurts a little bit. And I feel the tension of my neck wanting to like compress. My ear feels a little cloudy on the left side, and I want to step back into the awareness that I'm the art of receiving and giving, and there's agency in artistry, and I want to attune to the sort of somatic agency. To dissipate whatever emotional content that might be coming up historically. There's something here that feels like structural, like receiving, but also giving at the same time. It's like I have this question of, can I do both? Is it okay to do both simultaneously, or is it better to practice one and release or relinquish the opposite to the other person so that I can disentangle it a little bit? And I kind of want to explore that. So what happens if I'm just receiving right now? Receiving through taking in. I'm aware of this area between my heart and my throat, again, that keeps coming up. It's like, that's the area that I want to practice this. Can I receive there? Can I take in? Energetics that feel good in that area of my body. There goes my creaky floor again. I have this awareness right now that I just feel like calming my mind, my eyes, letting my eyes rest, and allowing my head to feel like it's reclined, supported, leaned back. I don't have to feel so sight oriented, gaze focused. A lot comes up with my eyes, a lot of this peeling back of around the eye socket has come up. It started as feeling like they were like full of gunk, like sleep, like early in the embodiment series of this daily December that we're doing. And now, or a couple days ago, I think it was, they started to feel clear and clean. And they still do now, but they also feel like, oh, but now like the muscles and like the tissue feel like they just want to feel touched. They want to receive, maybe. And I just want to scratch my head and ask if there's anything missing, if there's anything incomplete about this space. Now there's like a forward and back. It's like, feels like a dance, like letting it happen a little smoothly, like easy connect, easy disconnect, easy come into play, easy release from the experience. It's something that feels good there. Okay. Thank you for joining me. I'm curious if you received anything out of that embodiment, out of that walk, and what that might have been for you. Some of these walks, they have a way of being exactly what we need, and also sometimes they feel a little elusive, these embodiment sessions. And it doesn't feel like, well, let me say this. I feel more grounded. I feel more clear. My body feels more open. I feel more engageable, more relational, and I feel more accepting of myself and the place that I'm in right now, which is a complex experience. So I think that's all for today. Yeah. I love you. Thank you for being here with me. See you tomorrow.